Story 1. I think sometimes even with good money, if you have bad coworkers, it will make your days longer. On your days off, you still are not in a good mood. When you feel like this for too long, it can affect your happiness. Sometimes it is better to quit, even if the wage will be lower. Story 2. I had a particularly difficult patch cycle with a cable modem router. All of our cable modem termination systems were configured the same, but this one in Boise would malfunction, drop route tables, and otherwise be a complete problem. Multiple architects had reviewed it, contractors had reviewed it, engineers spent far too much time on it, but every maintenance window was a disaster. Our senior leadership was extremely concerned about downtime. Our fourth attempt at patching had just failed, and I said, "Let it fail. Figure it out. It's obvious we won't resolve it while it's rolled back, or we would have already. I'll take the responsibility. Let it fail and fix it." We troubleshot throughout the night for a full 7 hours of downtime and ultimately found it was a firmware issue on a network interface card slotted as secondary. We fixed that too, and the router began functioning properly. Success. My director wanted me to make an example of my engineer for taking so long. I said no. I told him I wasn't going to do that, and if he wanted to make an example, he could write me up instead. He said, "No, you told the engineer to figure it out and he took too long. You will write him up." I went back to my desk, thought about it for a moment and said, "I'm sorry. I'm not going to do that. Punish me instead. It was my call. Write him up. Here's my resignation. Thank you for 10 years of working for a wonderful company. You, on the other hand, are a terrible new addition, and I won't be here while you destroy what I've built." I got a great job and took most of the engineering staff with me. Integrity is why I walked away. Story 3. My husband left a project management job to become a kindergarten teacher. He didn't have the motivation to get out of bed in the morning to help a big company make more money and work with the most arrogant people he had ever met. Teaching is a different kind of challenge but more fulfilling with summers off. Story 4. Burnout, toxic culture, and leadership. Job as a software engineer not as described. Doing customer implementations at a 250-person company, while feedback was that I did not ship enough code. My sanity is worth more than what they were paying me. Story 5. The choice was partially made for me. The company I was working for was shutting down in my state. I had the option to change division with a significant pay cut or to relocate and keep my position. A third option existed as well, which was to change employers. Moving was out of the question for me. I did not want to go to their manufacturing division. I thought about trying to get a job in the same position, environmental health and safety, with another company. However, while looking for a new job, I realized that in the last few years, I had not really enjoyed what I did. I had the means to pursue work that I enjoyed or at least found fulfilling, so why not? Why continue down a career path that has me waking up and saying, "This is only Tuesday"? Story 6. I hated it. I had to do it all the time. And when I was not working, I could not relax because I was thinking about work. Most importantly, I realized I was spending too much money paying other people to do things for me so I could keep working or buying things to take my mind off my unhappiness with my job. I decided I would rather make less, spend less, work less, and worry less. Story 7. I just left senior management at Tesla. It was a combination of burnout, toxic culture, my child receiving a full scholarship to college, and finding something I am truly passionate about. Story 8. I didn't make a lot of money, but I was in technology for 4 years after college. I wasn't motivated to do a good job and was bored just getting by. I was laid off along with many others and decided to take some time off. I ended up working at an after-school program and enjoyed it. I have been teaching for 9 years now. There are good days and bad days, but I care much more about my work. Having summers off gives me a reset when I get tired of it. Story 9. Burned out, and it was an industry I did not care about. I spent 30 years showing up, collecting a very high paycheck, and doing work that felt utterly meaningless. I retired in my late 50s and could not get out fast enough. Set me up with a very nice nest egg. I feel like I played the game, paid my dues, and could not be happier to have moved on now. Story 10. Long-term job satisfaction requires 2 of the following 3: good salary, good coworkers, enjoyment of the role. You can survive on one of these if it is particularly strong, but not forever. Story 11. When the owner hired his children, elevated them to positions for which they were not qualified, and paid them much more than the rest of the company despite years of loyalty, service, and profits from the other management staff, it created problems. Anyone who says, "We are more like family here," should be cautious. Story 12. Burnout, no support. I spoke up saying I was struggling, and they said, "Prove it." They didn't believe me because I was a person who wore many hats and was really good at my job. Quit. After I quit, they hired someone more experienced than me and still had to hire 2 more people. Story 13. Burned out. I worked a random schedule every week that included overnight shifts, weekends, and most holidays. It really disrupted my sleep pattern and increased my anxiety because I also had to be on call 24/7 for emergencies. Story 14. Mine was not that high for the number of hours worked. I was on a salary of $4,000 a month at a restaurant, but the manager did not hire people with good work ethic, so I was constantly working overtime, sometimes until midnight and beyond. Story 15. 7 figures. Decided to quit during Savasana at the end of a yoga class. Got out and quit. Toxic environment. Burnout. Executive-level corporate politics. Abusive behavior by chief executive officer. Expectation to respond to emails in under 5 minutes. 7 days a week. At all hours. Cult-like behaviors. Culture of fake humility masking arrogance. Grandiose, on-display Christianity 24/7. Morning prayers sent around. Praying before meetings and praying before meals. Value-destroying business decisions. Chief-level executives all lacked quality education and experience. Only internal experience but did not know basic concepts like what a key performance indicator is. I could go on. Story 16. It wasn't the highest paying job, but it was the peak of what my previous career could offer. My manager would often remind us that if we didn't like their decisions, there was a line of people who would do anything to put on that uniform. I quit after 3 of my colleagues took their own lives within 2 years, one of whom killed their children first. Management often surprised us with unexpected meetings on our days off. Finally, I was called in for a meeting. I gathered my uniforms, walked into my boss's office, placed a bag of their property on her desk, and said, "I don't know why I'm being called in here today, and frankly, I don't care anymore. Quit. Please have security escort me to my locker. We're done here." Story 17. Burnout. I worked for my state as a mental health provider. The clients were generally okay, but my coworkers would clock in, go home, and then come back just to clock out. It was a union job, so when I reached out to a union representative about it, I was laughed at and told to accept the situation. Story 18. I got burnt out and my mental health declined. I did not see a future there and realized I needed to make a change. Story 19. All the memories from many years of working from the bottom to the top remain with me. I never forgot the effort it took, and even though I was no longer in that position, I was not going to treat the people below me the way I was treated. The owners of the company kept pushing me to do things I was not comfortable with, so I left the dream job that was also the highest paying job I ever had. Story 20. Because I did not like the city I moved to, I moved back to where I was before and have regretted it every day since. Story 21. Severe internal conflict. I was basically warming a chair to keep me away from competitors. I was making nearly 6 figures for sitting around. I am driven by creating things, and this killed me from the inside out. I started experiencing severe road rage, whereas before it was normal road frustration. I thought I was going to hurt someone, so I quit. I radically changed careers. I am a dual income, no kids couple, which is why I am not homeless as a result. I wouldn't say it worked for me financially in the end, but many of my old peers are now losing their jobs to artificial intelligence, and I just don't know what to think about that. It was especially hard to work near others who were making even more than me and who proudly did nothing, whereas I felt shame for having no work. I also thought the work I did was damaging because it manipulated people, and while I was right, it has become much worse since I quit. My retirement plan is confidential. I am not writing that down. Anyway, you asked. Story 22. I could tell I did not want to go to the parties, dinners, and hang out with business professionals. It just was not me. Story 23. I made the mistake of accepting a promotion into management from engineering right as the 2008 recession began. I spent the next 3 years laying people off, dealing with nonsense instead of solving engineering problems, and falling into the deepest depression of my life. I finally asked if I could lay myself off, and after some discussion, the higher-ups agreed. I was able to walk away, with a nice severance package to figure out my next move. A coworker who had been laid off invited me on the best fishing trip of my life because he said, "I know you are not going to be working either." I absolutely would not have gone if I were still working. I did nothing besides work. I had accumulated a lot of survivor's guilt during that period, and suddenly it felt like I could breathe again. Story 24. I make around $500,000 to $750,000 per year. I just got back from 2 weeks in Bermuda. I am having a difficult time adjusting to being back. I have been in investment banking for 15 years now, and I am not sure how much longer I want to stick to the soulless grind, but nothing else will pay anything close to investment banking. Eventually, I will walk away, but not yet. Story 25. I was burned out and switched to a lower-paying job working 1 week in 3 instead of 1 in 2. Then, that ended up having too much politics, and my old job offered me 1 week in 3, so I went back. I am a teleradiologist. Story 26. I was debating quitting when I got laid off. It was toxic. Most of the team was job searching. Leadership did not acknowledge business needs, skipped training, and regularly laid off qualified staff. We lost a lot of talent necessary to do the work. It was known as a churn and burn place. Story 27. My employer consistently failed to keep their promises. My independent income reached the point where I did not have to work. Story 28. Difficult coworkers, poor management, long working hours, mental stress, and sleepless nights. Experiencing hair loss due to the job and requiring anxiety medication. Story 29. I worked as an insurance agent in service. I was regularly told to lie to people and got in trouble when I refused. It is a longer story than that, but that was the gist of it. I was earning almost $30 per hour. That might not seem like a lot, but I was only 21. Story 30. I used to quit high-paying jobs for other high-paying jobs, but after COVID-19 was over, it is now common to wait to get let go after 2 to 3 years. I am more than 2 years in, and these days you could be let go tomorrow from a seemingly great company on paper. Story 31. In my case, the workload kept increasing. As people retired or quit, they were not replaced or were replaced with less skilled employees. The experienced workers had to pick up the slack. I had a conversation with a friend and former coworker who works part-time in the same field and still earns a 6-figure salary. Less headaches, less responsibility, and fewer hours? Sign me up. Story 32. I got laid off, but I could have easily made a lateral move. Instead, I figured I had enough passive income and a good nest egg to just retire. It is fun seeing the reactions of people when they find out I retired in my mid-30s. Story 33. Because I lost my cool and yelled at somebody. Not just saying, "You're an idiot," but stomped around the office yelling. I just lost all composure. I was only weeks away from getting an equity stake in the company as well. I just walked away. Story 34. Not me, but my cousin. The office politics and nurses constantly hitting on him, even though he has clearly mentioned that he is taken. Story 35. Value misalignment between my boss and me. Hypocrisy resulting from the mismatch between my boss's values and the stated company values. Story 36. I was used as a test subject and had no real training for what I was expected to do. I was exhausted from chasing a moving target all the time, and my anxiety was at an all-time high. Story 37. You can make more money, but you can't ever make more time. In fact, you don't really know how much sand you have left in the top half of the hourglass. Every second and every moment of every day, it is ebbing away. Your children may grow up and you will just be a stranger with a wallet to them. Your spouse will wonder when you turned into a withered abacus apparently clothed in human flesh. Your friends are transactional work colleagues who are your rivals. Your real friends dropped away because friendships should always be kept in good repair. If you never have time for your friends, they will not have time for you either. Do not worry though. Maybe at the end of your career you will be presented with a Rolex with inscriptions on the back. Ironically, you will never need to know the time much once you retire. Your post-retirement will be lonely and your children will seldom visit you in the nursing home. Story 38. I got so high up that I could not make anything and instead sat in meetings all day. When you start managing more than 100 people, your days of creativity are few and far between. Story 39. Unstoppable force of corporate greed meets immovable object of my stubborn morals. No, I will not do that just because sales are down 15% since last year. Story 40. They were abusing international staff and workers on H-1B visas, whom they had lured with false promises of good positions, then assigned to low-level, poorly paid roles. Whistleblowing did nothing to fix the situation. Some were hurt badly but afraid to ask for help or report it. I couldn't continue being part of that environment, especially when my reports on the abuse went nowhere. The only positive outcome from that place was my former coworker, who is now my wife. Story 41. Prepare thoroughly for technical interviews even after 15 years in the field. Participate in several interview panels. Secure the job and identify opportunities to fix and streamline systems to save millions annually. Often, you will hear, "We don't have the funds to implement those changes." This happens repeatedly. Eventually, it becomes clear that most bosses want their employees to do nothing but appear productive. Story 42. Financially, we had made enough money for me to take an extended career break. So I quit my job at a major technology company with a big salary and significant equity to be a stay-at-home mom to our tweens. I liked working, but my job had become increasingly boring, with more toxicity and annoying coworkers, so I decided I didn't need the stress anymore since we didn't need the money. I don't miss it at all. I do miss working in general, but it has felt much more meaningful to be more present for my kids, so I'm going with that for now. Story 43. I worked 70 hours a week and only got paid for 40. I worked in healthcare. I spent hours each day off working. I had no free time. I had nothing but stress and misery. When "I hate my life" became my daily mantra, and I meant it, I knew I had to leave. I am now homeless, unemployed, and cannot find anyone who will hire me. But I do not miss healthcare at all. Story 44. Family elder care was important to me. I wanted my parents, who were divorced and lived more than 100 miles apart, to age with dignity in the comfort of their own homes. I could have continued working and placed them both in nursing homes, but that was not an option. Story 45. After a well-organized board meeting, when it was time for a victory lap and in my mind a glass of sparkling wine, my colleagues commiserated about their daily level of anxiety, while the boss earned $3.5 million a year. Why do a job that scares you every day? We were not in the business of saving puppies, kittens, or babies. Story 46. We were quite sure I was going to retire early. Our division's excellent director resigned, and the replacement was eager to impress management at the expense of projects and people. They started creating new low-level positions that did not require upper-level certifications and degrees like mine. She focused on administrative work rather than skilled work and communication needs. She made it easy for me to opt out. A year later, my manager and my peers who had experience equal to or greater than mine were also let go. Story 47. The job paid well, but it was not going to give me the skills I wanted. I was never told during the technical interview that the task I was responsible for would be the main thing I would be doing. It was a contractor role. After the first day, I told my agency that I quit. Story 48. Bosses 7 and 8 were a married couple who owned a family business. The husband liked to spend money on unnecessary equipment, and the wife was a micromanager. As a result, they doubled the number of office employees to handle all of her tasks. Story 49. Well-paying job in a great company, but did not enjoy the field and had limited opportunities to grow. Followed my passion into mental health for much less pay and stability, but I end my day feeling like I made a difference. Story 50. Left an executive chef job because it was cutting into my life, 70 to 80 hours a week. Took a $20,000 pay cut to go back to being a normal cook, working 45 hours a week. I am back to my executive chef job, but I have boundaries now and support. Story 51. Analog application-specific integrated circuit design. The boss kept lying and expected me to support him. Of course, my unwillingness to go along caused conflict. He then started lying to me. He lied about a fire marshal inspection, then escalated to lying in design reviews and reprimanding me for raising concerns. I just wanted to leave and walked out. In another life, he would be a successful used car salesman. Story 52. As a former high-level accountant, I grew tired of helping untrustworthy people with their numbers and enabling their bonuses. I also became frustrated with the toxic culture of unpleasant individuals and miserable, unfair critics who take issue with everything. I now work in retail, and it has been the best decision ever. Story 53. Work-life balance. Cliché but real. I spent about 5 years on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I took calls during my kids' birthday parties and at 3 a.m. I had only 4 days of holidays in total during that time, but I still had the phone with me. I gained 100 pounds and was drinking too much. I took a 50% pay cut but saved my mental health and my marriage. Story 54. The chief executive officer was verbally abusive. He called me incompetent and trash without any reason, so I quit the next day. Story 55. I hated it. I exhausted all my time off options by the time February came around. It was a toxic work environment. Between the clients and cardholders, I was over it. Once I was put on a performance improvement plan, I realized my time had come to an end. That being said, I would probably never work in the fraud department anywhere ever again. My part-time job let me move to full-time, so in June, I resigned right before my shift and have zero regrets. Story 56. I got bored. Having the same arguments and issues with the same kinds of people asking the same questions and not listening to the answers. Add to that working long hours and seeing colleagues older than me having to phone home morning and evening just for a chance to see their kids more than just on the weekends, when we are all exhausted. I knew I had to get out. Story 57. A micromanager took over and disrupted the entire workflow. Internal politics resulted in me being passed over twice for a job I was more than qualified for. High taxes in California meant my $94,000 salary only resulted in take-home pay comparable to what I earned working overtime in college. Story 58. Big money is not always more important than morale. That is why my psychological health is more important to me. Story 59. I had a great job with excellent pay and will never regret a day of work. But the conditions were unbearable. I left because I did not see myself surviving to 40 years old with this lifestyle. Some people might have, but after a brilliant younger colleague passed away, I could not lie to myself. Story 60. I quit my average-paying but active and fun job for a managerial position at a large multinational software company that paid significantly more than my previous salary. Suddenly, I had to do nothing except show up for an integration party once a month in a different country. I could just nod at my office for a day, and nobody would care. This might sound like a dream for most people, but for me, it felt like a huge waste of time. I lasted 10 months before I finally gave up. Story 61. My mental health. Working in the mental health field, it is really important that you are mentally well yourself. I was a manager at a mental health charity when I went on maternity leave, and postnatal anxiety was horrendous. I knew I could not go back. I completely changed careers after my baby. No regrets, though. Money is not everything. Story 62. I took a nice severance package at 52. I read Reddit all day and look at the pool outside my window. It is way more relaxing. Life is to be lived, not worked. I also have passes to most of the parks in Orlando. Story 63. I currently have my highest paying job ever, but difficult coworkers and constant overworking are making me want to quit. I plan to stay 1 year for the experience, then leave this job. Story 64. I was a vice president of operations for a $160 million per year company, making pretty decent money. I loved the company and 99% of the people I worked with. Unfortunately, there was another vice president who was a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and because I was gay, he made every day a nightmare for me. We had to work very closely together, and he would actively sabotage my projects. telling his employees to ignore directives or to go around me. I finally gave up and decided it was not worth my time or stress. Story 65. I repaired medical robotics, which was an amazing job before the COVID-19 pandemic. During the pandemic, a light week was 60 hours due to various factors, mainly staffing issues. After the pandemic, they hired a few people but also decided that I no longer needed to fix robots, which was the reason I was there. I had a job that paid well, so I decided that was enough and left. Story 66. Simple, terrible leadership made the workplace toxic. I am a very supportive and transparent leader to my team, so it was even worse because I knew what a good workplace looked like for my staff. However, I did not have that with the chief executive officer despite years of consistent success. It was not that I had a bad relationship with the chief executive officer. He was just a bad person. He was secretive and opaque about motives for no reason, did not keep any core principles, provided no clear direction or strategy, did not support other leaders who were having a tough time, and regularly berated leaders who did not meet his constantly moving targets or who did not have immediate answers to unforeseeable issues. I left because, even though I had never been on the receiving end of his nonsense, I expected it would happen one day. I worried I might say something that would damage my career, so I had to leave while my reputation was still intact. Fortunately, after 10 months of searching, I found a lateral move to another organization with much better leadership. The stress is still present, but it is much better without the wild volatility affecting everyday work life. Story 67. I was an officer on liquefied natural gas vessels. While the money is high for my country, I worked 10 to 12 hours daily, and my day off was Sunday when I only worked 8 hours. At some point, you just think, what is the point of working up to 9 months on board without seeing your family, to earn money you cannot spend properly? Story 68. Started a new job around Christmas. The other employee had worked there for 31 years. My Christmas bonus was $50, as expected because I had just started. His bonus was also $50 after 31 years. I left that day and did not return. Story 69. I got a new internal job that changed literally within 1 month of taking it. Then, I had a new regional head come in with a have-to-make-my-mark attitude. After he fired 1/4 of the managers, I realized he had set me up to go next. So I gave my 2 weeks notice and immediately felt great. I realized that the last weeks had been draining the soul out of me. Story 70. Terrible management, sometimes my direct superior, sometimes the entire management chain. Often, they were brought in from outside to shake things up, which resulted in 80% of a department resigning. Story 71. High stress and high energy were required every day. Bosses did not understand their role, and there was a generous pension that began when I hit 55. I was burnt out and needed to slow down rather than wait for a mental crash. After 33 years, it was time for the younger ones to step forward and fill the vacuum I left. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.